a really heartfelt thank you. Thank you so much for everything that you do and for the time that you give up. Truly, our trust and our children wouldn't benefit as much as they do without all the help and support and challenge that governors bring to our trust. So thank you very, very much. I'm going to hand over to Emma, who's going to start the presentation. Emma, I'll control the slides if you just want to let me know when you're ready, okay?
Thanks, Kerry. So the aims of the session today, so really what we want you to end up having is the ability to look at some of the documentation that we use and have a real clear understanding of how that how you can challenge and how you can support in your governor and trustee roles. Some of these documents are related just to governors, but obviously trustees do get an oversight of those as well. So we thought it was important that we brought governors and trustees together to do this session. So we've obviously allowed you to have some reading time. When we were planning this, we thought it was so important. We just don't have that opportunity in our busy lives to be able to do that kind of thing. So hopefully you've found that helpful already. At the end of this session, we hope that you'd have a broad understanding of the Rivermead Inclusive Trust lab documentation and how it fits in with the Ofsted framework. Also know the expectations of being a governor, including monitoring. To have an understanding of the send in a nutshell monitoring documents and how that fits in with the governor documentation and how it would be used within our schools. That's something quite new to us as a school. We've always had an overview, but this is a new document. And to learn how the Rivermead Inclusive Trust governor documentation is used to devise questions for senior leaders. So we're going to do a bit of a workshop at the end that hopefully you'll be able to then, when you get your own lab documentation, the head teacher's report from the different schools, you'll be able to think, oh yes, no, I remember now, that's where I can ask a question like this. So that part will be quite practical. Thanks, Kerry. So just to say, at any point, if you do have questions that's relevant for the slide that I'm on, please do stop and ask. There will be lots of opportunities for you to ask questions at the end and during the lab workshop as well. But if there's anything pertinent to what I'm saying, then please do. We can't always see little hands popping up, so please do just call out. Thank you. So the Ofsted framework. So we've been working on this Ofsted framework for quite a while now. There are 4 areas of the Ofsted framework. Quality of education, which includes intent, implementation and impact. Behaviours and attitudes, personal development and leadership and management. And these 4 areas are used within our self-evaluation form, which every school has, and our school development plan. So we write our targets, we write our priorities within these areas. And you are also allocated as a governor an area of responsibility for monitoring, and it will be in one of these 4 areas as well as other specific areas that we need to monitor. But you will be assigned an area for quality of education or behaviour and management, personal development or leadership and management. Thanks, Kerry. So what we do is we look at the guidance that's given to us by Ofsted. So it's the school's framework handbook, and what we do is we use that to create our self-evaluation form. There's a little typo there, it's not from, it's form. So we use this to create our self-evaluation form, and there is some small little slides there. I know it's not as big as we were hoping it to be, but I'm sure you will all have seen the SEF before, and the SEF acts like a scorecard. Oh, thank you, Kerry. That's brilliant. So it acts as a scorecard. So you'll see there's lots of different colours on it. So the green is good, purple is outstanding, our orange is requires improvement, and our red, which you would never see, is serious weaknesses. So you'll see on this scorecard here is good and outstanding, which is a wonderful position to be in. It's an evaluation tool for interested parties to see the position the school is currently in. It breaks down the Ofsted framework into smaller sections, and the SLT in the school then add a grade for each of these individual sections and supporting evidence. There's a summary page at the front, which is the overall effectiveness. So it's all of those areas put together with the overall effectiveness. And if you have time to read anything, that is the most important page, that overall effectiveness page. So you get a good flavour of the position the school's sitting in. Underneath all the overall effectiveness and the summary page is all of the individual areas which the school is graded itself on. So you'll see their vision and ethos, staff development, that all comes within the leadership and management section. The CEF should really give you a good understanding of the position the school is currently sitting in. And it's always shared with governors at the first meeting of the year in September, October, so that you can ratify it, so you agree that the school is sitting in that position. Thank you, Kerry. So as well as sitting alongside the CEF, the self-evaluation form, sits our school development plan. So our school development plan looks at our priorities for the next 3 years and the next one and the next year along as well. And within our school development plan, we have this flowchart. It demonstrates that in the June and July, so around about this time, the school is sourcing from all the different stakeholders involved the priorities for the next school year, the next 1 year and the next 3 years. The priorities are then shared with governors in the July meeting, and they are then ratified as the important priorities. The finer detail, kind of the meat on the bones, the little actions that go along with that, are then written within July and over the summer holidays, ready to present in the September meeting, where the final school development plan is then agreed. During the year, the governors then use this document to focus their termly monitoring on. And there's another document which I've put alongside there. It's called The Role of the School Governor in Setting, Monitoring and Evaluating the School Development Plan Priorities, the critical friend. And that is a fantastic document to support you and it goes along with the Governor Visitor Policy as well in supporting you in monitoring and setting those targets. Thanks, Kerry. So then what will be presented is the school development plan. So these pages will be presented to you in your July meeting. So these are the 3-year plan and the 1-year plan. And they're on the first few pages of the school development plan. It's very different, this plan, than we've shared before. What we wanted to do was have very clear priorities that could be shared with governors in the July. And that's why we've developed a new school development plan. The school development plan also then goes into termly actions rather than being written for the whole year. I'll show you that in a moment. So this is a different documentation for those governors that have been with us a few years and would have seen a different school development plan. This plan, when it's shared with you in July, is there for challenge and support and questioning. So if you see anything on there and you think, well, actually, over the last year, I didn't see any of that in my monitoring, or I thought that was outstanding. Why is it on your school development plan? Why is it being developed? This is your chance then to question why those priorities are on there for us to focus on. So this will be shared with you in the July meeting. And then on the next page, Kerry, thank you, Kerry, you will see that then the finer detail, the meat on the bones, is then written over the course of July and into the holidays with the SLT teams at each of the schools. And this part will be shared with you in the September or October meeting. So the actions here and success criteria and milestones are all written to give more detail about how that priority is going to be met within the terms. So we are only writing terms 1 and 2. We will be very short and succinct targets that will have an action within those terms. So you won't be seeing actions for terms 3 or 4 or 5 and 6. Actions for terms 3 and 4 are written in December, and actions for terms 5 and 6 are written in April, ready for the May. This means that as a governor and a trustee, you can really monitor the actions of that priority. So you can see the small steps that the schools are making towards the end big goal. I think sometimes, being a governor myself as well, you see this big end goal, and be it sometimes, if you're not an educationalist as well, it's really difficult to think about how you can monitor the impact or the progression towards that big end priority. So this documentation will really support you in choosing some different areas for monitoring. Now, being a governor, if you could just pop back one slide to Kerry, thank you. So the priorities here, as you know, as a governor, we have governor fortnights now. So if you are a governor, this is a quality of education example here. From the example you can see here, you may decide to go and look at assessment for learning in practice, because that is number 2 priority. Ensure teachers use frequent, good quality AFL strategies with daily teaching. So you may ask the head teacher, well, can I come in and see, can I go on a learning walk and see assessment for learning strategies? You may ask to look at the CPD timetable to monitor teachers' pedagogy, and that's just a document that will be sent. And then you may ask to meet with the ECT, so the Early Career Teacher Mentor, to discuss the mentoring programme. Please do not feel you have to monitor every single target that's written, because there will be quite a few to put the meat on the bones. It's picking out key priority actions to monitor. Thank you, Kerry. So once you have decided your focuses from the school development plan for your governor fortnight monitoring, then it would be time to book in that monitoring visit with the head teacher, the head of school, the head of provision, via email. And we always say to CC the chair of the lab in as well, so they can see the kind of visits that are going on. And then send any questions beforehand, where possible, to the head of school, head of provision, or head teacher. Whilst you're doing your visit, there may be opportunities to complete the governor visit or after, and Kerry will explain more about this in a moment. And please ensure that the summary and the action boxes are complete. And the reason why it's important for those boxes to be complete is on the next slide. You will see, as part of our governor monitoring and part of our school development plan, we now have a governor monitoring box on that school development plan to show the impact that governor monitoring is having with setting our targets and our actions and our priorities. So what will happen is, once your governor visit has been sent over to the head teacher, head of school and head of provision, they will copy and paste those summary and action sections into the relative boxes on the school development plan to show the monitoring and impact. And this is a real development for the Rivermead Inclusive Trust governance side, because we really do want to demonstrate how important your role is to our schools. As Kerry said at the start, this is a volunteer role, and we know you give up so much valuable time, but you also make so much impact. So this is a document that really will show how your visits are impacting on further developments of our school. The completed school development plan will then be shared with you, and you can use the key question action sections for the next part of the monitoring. So if you've asked some questions at the end of the first round of fortnightly monitoring, on the next time we come round to monitoring, you may want to ask how those questions have been developed and use those to base your next part of your monitoring, as well as other actions from the school development plan. And that's my part complete, Kerry. Thank you for listening.
Does anybody have any initial questions for Emma? I can't see hands up. Emma, could you have a look there for me?
No, I can't see any hands going up at the moment, Kerry.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mr. Dadson.
Can I just draw trustees and lab members to this week's teaching and learning newsletter, which sits on our trust website, because this week it's got all of the changes that have come about as part of the new Ofsted framework. So it might just be worth having a look through that just to see how the bits that Emma talked about have just been tweaked, ready for the 2021-22 cycle going through. And just to add as well, because I think it was really pertinent point that Emma raised in relation to the CEF, that actually it's a really good opportunity to monitor that honesty is probably a better word, honesty of the school, because actually it'd be lovely if the schools just put purple all the way down their CEF. So that's where a lot of your questioning can come in, because an Ofsted team would much prefer oranges going down, and you've identified that there's areas of development rather than you're saying good, because obviously the whole purpose of the inspection is to quality assure what the leadership of the school are saying about themselves.
Thanks, Paul. So before I move on to my part, I wanted to just remind governors and trustees that we have had a governance review, and we had that, I think, at least 12 months ago. And as part of that, we've got an action plan, and our action plan, we are well underway. Well on the way to kind of achieving all of those actions. One of the big areas is about kind of evidence of monitoring at governor and trustee level. So this is one of the areas that I wanted to kind of focus on today. Really, there are the 3 core functions of governors and trustees, and it's about our vision, ethos, and strategic direction. It's holding executive leaders to account for performance of the school and the pupils, and the effective and efficient performance management of staff, and overseeing the financial performance of the organisation and making sure we're getting value for money. Now, we do delegate that to trustees, and we have a trust finance board who oversee all of that. But at local level, you would expect to see lab members making sure that resources are deployed in the most appropriate areas. So we'll come on to that in a second. So really, in terms of the strategic overview, it is about the vision of the school. As governors, there are some questions that you might want to consider. So do you know what the vision is? Is it clear? Where is the school on its journey? So is it, it requires improvement school, get on the way to outstanding, or is it always been a really solidly good school and now we're moving to trying to get to outstanding? What are the key objectives and priorities? And again, that comes from the school development plan. And as governors, looking at resources, if we know that we have a problem in the school that our children with SEND don't make as much progress as their peers, then do we have resources deployed in those areas, for example? What kind of monitoring goes on in the school, and how do you know? And who is responsible for doing what? So there'd be some of the initial questions that maybe as a new governor or as a current governor who wants to just refresh, because roles do change. So that would be something that, in the first meeting of the year, you might want to establish. Obviously making sure that policies are in place. And when it comes to looking at the outcome of monitoring and evaluating, making sure that when a review has been done, or a data drop has taken place, well, what is that showing us? What does that tell us? It's about making sure that we have a plan ahead, which is, a proactive plan to raise standards, and that the school development plan, which is also written in conjunction with the trust executive team, it's fit for purpose, and making sure that the agenda items on the lab meetings, they actually reflect what the priorities are. So as a trust, we have a standard template for lab reports. We don't at trust level, but we mirror a lot of the kind of agenda items from local level at trust level, but we do it in a more combined fashion. So that's the strategic overview. In terms of monitoring and evaluating, really it's looking at how successful is the school in terms of results. How do the results compare with local results, similar schools, and with national results? Are they going up? Are they going down? Are they sitting in the middle? Whereabouts are they? And really, really importantly for us, how are the groups of pupils doing? Do we, do we have an issue with SEND children or with looked after children, et cetera, to, that they're not making the same progress as their peers. So that would be something to dig down into in some of your meetings. If we do have problems with some pupils not making the progress expected, well, what is the school doing about that? What are the expectations? That's a really good question I would ask as governor. I'm also governor in another school. What are our expectations? So we all set targets for our young people, aspirational targets. And what do those targets look like? Are they indeed aspirational? So some good questions there for you. And also looking at exclusions and attendance. Attendance this year in parts of our trust has been a bit rocky, and I think that's a reflection of the needs of the pupils. But we would, be looking for what is the school doing about making sure the attendance is in line with national at least. And then how is the school monitoring teaching and learning, and how is the review of the SEND register going? We don't just keep children on the SEND register. Some children's needs change. So is that reviewed regularly? So that would be some of the questions you might want to consider. And then in terms of accountability, it's really about, are we involving our stakeholders, especially our parents? Are papers from the meetings readily available? Are there clear policies in place? And as a team, as a lab or trust team, how involved are you with appointments of staff, grievances, disciplinaries, capabilities, and redundancy matters? Because that is part of the governor role and the trustee. So when Ofsted come, which they will, however, hopefully not too soon. I think that Paul and I have been chatting about the new notice from Ofsted, which is, Paul, what was your message last night that's just come through?
That if you have had a section 5, which out of our schools was Who St Werburgh and the Marlborough Centre, they're talking about extending the gap between inspections to 7 years now, which means the next inspection at Who and Marlborough Centre will not be due until 2025 at the earliest. So having said that, if there are any concerns, obviously Ofsted would come before that.
Absolutely. So, but we are in an Ofsted window for some of our other schools as well. So, some of the things they're looking for, agenda, minutes, paperwork, data reports that have been produced and looked at by governors, making sure the policies are all in place, and really importantly, your visit reports, because it shows then that there's real impact there. Training records, which we do excellently across our trust, reports and discussions, a whole range of kind of meaningful documents that will help Ofsted see the impact that our governors and our trustees make. I took this directly from our visiting policy, and our visiting policy is available on Governor Hub and on the Trust website. So hopefully this is not new to you.
Kerry,
yes.
Just to stop you there, you do know you're not sharing the PowerPoint anymore.
Well, am I not?
No.
Oh.
Is that for everybody else as well? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh, thank you for telling me, Emma.
No worries. I thought you might want to share the visit policy. So.
Is that better?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, hang on a second. So this wording is taken directly from the visiting policy. The policy itself suggests that there are some kind of key areas that you would expect a governor to be linked to. So health and safety, special educational needs and safeguarding. And I know we do have that in place across all of our schools and across the trust. The visiting policy suggests that 3 monitoring visits in person or virtually really should take place across the year. And what we've done, hopefully to be helpful, is we've put together some dates on our trust calendar, which we will share with you, which are going to kind of reflect the governor fortnight. So if you can spare any time during that time, and it'll happen 3 times a year, if you can spare any time during that time, to conduct one of your visits, that would be really most appreciated. And any other ad hoc meetings if required. If you're linked to a specific area or a subject, then again, 3 monitoring visits, and then 1 subject learning walk or area learning walk. So if it was character education, for example, you might want to then have a look and see, well, what is actually happening in the school. So it's getting in and speaking to the children and the young people and teachers, etc. And then all governors are expected to carry out 1 learning walk per year, attend 1 school assembly in the year, and attend at least 1 educational visit. Now, we understand that might seem a lot. So, you know, that would be ideal for us, because it'll allow you as governors and trustees to really get a flavour of what's going on in the school, and to really understand the school. In terms of trustees, with the responsibility of safeguarding and health and safety, attendance to 3 meetings with the trust safeguarding lead or the facilities manager, etc. And all trustees will carry out 2 visits per year to a specific school. All trustees will be allocated to a different provision each year, so that you get a real flavour of you know, across the years of each school, and attend at least 1 school event. So that's really that's what it says in our visiting policy, and we're hoping that that's manageable for you. At the back of the visiting policy is this document, and this document is the monitoring report, which you can use. So it gives you some ideas of how to go about your monitoring, and some of the ways in which you might ask questions. This has changed recently, and we have added the boxes at the end. So the agreed actions for the school, the agreed actions for the governing body, and then the summary. And as Emma said, the summary bit here will be cut and pasted from your report into the school development plan at the end of that term, so that you can then, your views can be added in. So I hope it's all making sense so far, and I hope we're managing to link everything up. As you know, we have Governor Hub, which we're really lucky to have. It has a wealth of resources, and I just wanted to draw your attention to some of the resources that we've uploaded. So if you go into resources, if I can move my mouse, the resources here, and if you click on that, and it will bring you in. So it's Rivermead Inclusive Trust training resources and governor resources, and there are lots of different templates in here. And these templates we've just uploaded them. Some of them we've made, some of them we've pinched from other areas, but they're really useful. So if you were attached to a certain area, or a certain objective on the school development plan, you'll be able to go in there and find a template to help you in your role. So it's going to give you some suggested questions or some suggested areas to look at. They are templates with areas with boxes, and we would ask that if you can use to write this template to write your report. And I think that really is all from me. Does anybody have any questions? No hands up. Everybody's still there. That's great. I'm going to hand over now to Debbie, who's going to talk us through our SEND in a nutshell. I know a lot of us have attended recent local authority training on SEND, but we wanted to spoke it to our trust. So over to you, Debbie.
Hi, good morning. As Kerry said, I know quite a few of you attended the training by the LA, but what we wanted to do was come up with our own SEND in a nutshell document that we hoped would be supportive not only to yourselves but also used throughout the school procedures and processes. So this is what we've come up with, and the document's intended really to have several purposes, not least because SEN is a huge area. It's often an area that people feel quite lacking in confidence in and not quite sure, you know, what am I supposed to do about SEND? You know, I'm not a SEND specialist. How am I meant to hold people to account for SEND when it's something I really don't know very much about? So one of the purposes of this document from your point of view is you don't have to be a specialist to be able to ask pertinent and helpful questions to help the senior leadership team think about what they're doing with SEND. So it's going to be there to support the SENCO in the first instance, or the inclusion lead, in order to ensure that he or she is analysing what SEND looks like across the provision. You know, gone are the days where you just put out interventions merrily putting out interventions and not actually. Oh,
sorry,
Kerry, can you, that's all right. And not think about what you're doing, why you're doing it, and where you're actually putting your resources and why you're putting it there. You now need to be able to justify all of that. So the SENCO can use this document for that purpose. The other reason is for SLT, for leaders to actually look at the document and think, make budgetary decisions around where they want to put staff in, resourcing, allocate different areas of their budget. And it should really create a debate across the school community on what SEND actually looks like in the school. Because SEND can, in some schools, become hidden, and you don't really appreciate what the school challenges or the challenges for the pupils actually are. And finally, where you fit in, it's about being able to support your understanding of your school and what SEND looks like, and therefore why the SENCO, the SLT are making the decisions that they are within that school. So this front page starts with giving you a very broad picture here. So within the SEND Code of Practice, there are 4 broad areas: communication, interaction, sensory and processing needs, SEMH, which is a behaviour one, and cognition and learning. And there are different diagnoses that come in within each of those categories. And it's important to know most schools will fall into the speech and language. You'll find that a lot of cognition and interaction will be huge in most schools. There's a massive issue right across national with children arriving at school without the necessary foundational skills in terms of language and even speech. So that you will find is quite common. A growing area is SEMH, which is social, emotional, mental health needs. So this you will look at and think to yourself, okay, so in the school that I am governor of, I can see that there's a large level of need in a particular area. So I need to focus, when I'm looking at this review, on how that particular area then is being met. National comparisons within SEND is quite a tricky thing, especially at primary. But I think, Kerry, you were saying that you were going to work with the authority on trying to make that a little bit easier for us. Will the authority going to try and come up with some way of getting that comparative data?
I think Emma's been looking into it, haven't you, Emma?
Oh, Emma, right.
Yeah, at the moment they have the secondary information, but they haven't got the primary, so we're hoping to get that.
It's very, very difficult, and it always has been notoriously. Oh, Francis, sorry, I didn't see your hand up.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, when you started this document, it was really helpful because obviously all our learners are on the SEND register. So we broke it down even further into each ranking. So we were able to go back through each EHCP and make sure that our SIMS data was accurate, so that we can see, right, we're deploying more resources to speech and language, for example, because we know that there's a higher ranking of those learners compared to physical disability or something. So it really does help for us to kind of really analyse further why we're deploying certain funds to certain SEN needs.
Exactly, Francis, and it was the same for us, because initially when my SENCO looked at this document, I kind of went, well, Deb, all our children are going to fall in the C and I, because communication and interaction, autism sits within that broad band. So what we did then, we looked at, okay, but let's look at secondary need. Let's look at secondary need as on their EHCP, because we know they've all got autism here. We know that. And it really was useful exactly for the reason that Francis said, because it made us see, wow, you know, we thought we had a lot of children with the communication as their primary need, but actually it was becoming more and more prevalent that they were having SEMH difficulties. And so it's about looking at the provision there then. The final pie chart on here was to do with banding. So initially banding was brought in as a means of linking a certain level of funding to a certain degree of need. So the higher up the alphabetical code you go, the more need there is, so that the more complex needs of that child. In special school, that remains the same. So when Francis and I are trying to drag funding out of the LA, we use this banding system. It's more complex for mainstream schools, actually, because they don't recognise the banding system as such up at the authority for mainstream schools anymore. What they do is a provision mapping system. So basically, the mainstream schools have to prove that they are spending more than their notional SEM budget to meet need. Now, for us, in terms of being able to do what we're talking about here today, which is review SEM, my personal opinion is that we are still going to need some kind of categorisation so that we can see how many children are sitting at that very expensive or very complex end of the SEN register. I think it'd be very difficult for us to do this process without that sort of information. So whilst the LA aren't asking mainstream schools for banding, my personal opinion is that we should still be following some kind of banding system for this purpose. And also we've put pupil premium on here as well for the same reasons, because that's another area where we need to be looking very carefully. Any questions on that front page? That's so you can get a huge amount of information just from that one page there. This second page is again about, now we're going to break this down even further now, and we're going to make comparisons between, we're hoping, with Emma beavering away there with the primary and up at the LA. If she does it, she would have achieved something that I've not been able to achieve in all the years I've been in SEN. So go for it, Emma. But it would be really useful if we could, because then we can see nationally, because you can then also start to put a little bit of pressure on the LA. If we can say, look, we're way above national on children with SEMH, you can start to use that in a wider context when you're trying to grow your provision, trying to expand the what the trust is able to provide. So here it is about looking down very carefully and seeing where you actually fit against the national picture, and then you'll be able to just come up with some questions for your senior leadership teams and SENCO specifically about, wow, look, we're way above national on that one. So what are we doing? How are we meeting those needs? So this one here now, as you start to dig down a little bit further, so you start to peel back the layers now from that broad picture down into something a bit more specific. Notoriously, children who sit within more than one vulnerable group, it's not rocket science, are going to face far more difficulties in making progress and having their needs met. So it's important that we look at what percentage of pupils fall into more than one category. And again, the question there would be, you don't need any specialist SEN knowledge to say, wow, you've got a lot of children who are SEND and EAL. What are you doing about that? How are you meeting those needs? And then we're going back to the pie chart. So we've said, for example, that, and I'm making this up completely, up at Husat Werber, SEMH is coming out as a really high level of need on that pie chart. And yet we're looking at the children on the register now and which children are receiving the highest percentage of intervention within each broad area of need. And yet it's the cognition and learning that are. Now, with mainstream schools in the past, and I think this is now becoming less and less the case, a lot of it went into cognition and learning because of the pressures of getting those end of year and statutory tests done. I think that mainstream schools now are amazing at recognising that if you meet needs broadly across all, and as they are presenting, things will naturally progress at your end of year anyway. So that's one of the questions you might want to look at there. You might want to be saying, well, here's your pie chart that says the greatest area of need is this, and yet you're popping all your money into a completely different intervention broad area of need. Thanks, Kerry. So then we now come to the data side of it. And I know that data is on the agenda for a separate training for you. But again, you don't need to be a specialist or an analyst here. You can have a look at this and you can say, OK, so nationally, our SEND children are achieving better, or attaining better or worse. Why is that? Why is that when you're telling me you've put all this intervention into this particular area of need? What is it? Which children is it that are causing that gap? Now there is a little bit of caution here that I would always add. If your school, and this is why I like the bounds, if your school is predominantly sitting in that B band, that's where the biggest block of children are sitting. Those are children who you would expect to have some quick intervention and get straight back into the classroom. Children on the B band should be those very quick turnover children. They shouldn't have complex needs. Children sitting C, but definitely D and above, are predominantly more complex, and therefore that whole closing the gap agenda for those children is going to be nearby impossible for attainment for the majority. So what you need to be looking at is and asking questions about is, okay, that's fine, I accept that, but what progress then are they making, and how are you judging what good progress for them, for those children are? So that's why I like those bandings, because you can then look at those schools that might only have, say, I don't know, 33% on their SEND register, but they're all sitting up that D and E end, are going to struggle. Whereas a school that might have, you know, huge 63, 74% on their register, but are all sitting down at that B, are obviously going to get better results in terms of closing the gap agenda. So it's those sorts of questions that we need to be asking. And here we've also got the rate of exclusion. There is a real issue with exclusion and special needs, and it is a hot topic. So you must be aware of what the exclusion rates in your school and attendance rates in your schools are, but how many of those children, what percentage of those children have diagnosed SEND? And then there will be questions around, okay, so what have you done to support that child in order to prevent the exclusion in the first instance? Thanks, Kerry. Because of what I've just said in terms of the difficulties with closing the gap for those more complex kids, it's important that the SENCO doesn't just rely on whole school data, which was what the previous slide was showing. That was a broad sweep, whole school data. So as a governor, what you want to then be asking is, show me your own tracking system. how are you tracking against outcomes for that individual child? And what should be going on is a provision mapping or an intervention and therapy tracking system. And it goes back to what I was previously saying about those more complex children who aren't going to make great progress against the national curriculum assessment systems. They're not, just they wouldn't be complex if they were able to do that. But they should be able to show progression against their own personal targets using a system that's able to record those very small and holistic steps. And that's where we as a trust are at an advantage because of having Rivermead and the Marlborough Centre and Triple R and the college. We're at an advantage because we have specialist provisions here who do that. That's our daily bread. That's what we do. And we would be able to support our mainstream schools in helping them to do that. Thank you, Kerry. Now this one, this is about strategic thinking now. So here you come to the point where you want to know, you've seen all the evidence prior, you've got yourself a nice picture, overview of what's happening in the school, you've got an overview of where the biggest area of needs are and how those needs are being met. So now you're looking at how strategic are the senior leadership team and the SENCO in actually looking at where they are, identifying their strengths, identifying where they need to go next. And your wish list isn't just a blue sky thing, but it does or should provide you with an insight into the way the staff, the school is thinking. Because if they're suddenly saying that areas of development, Kerry mentioned something similar previously, if they're suddenly saying that areas of development are places where they've previously said they're doing very well, then that would be a flag to me. Are they thinking strategically enough? Have they really identified what their strengths are? And you might be able to have a conversation with them based on the information you've just seen about, well, is that right? Let's go back to what we've just discussed and have a word about whether this does reflect what we've just discussed. And therefore, does your wish list now still stand? Does that still make sense now?
To be able to have a look at the data yourself. So what you should have been getting as lab members is a document that looks slightly like this. Obviously it says head teacher, report to governors, trustees. You'll get a very similar version that Kerry and I put together, but actually just includes all of the schools within the trust together. The reason why we went for this uniform approach was because we were finding that over time some of our schools had loads and loads of information within their reports, and lab members reporting back that they were just getting lost in all of the documentation and all of the information. And actually we appreciate that you're very busy people, and actually to plough through a massive document, sometimes you lose the succinctness of the key information you need. And then on the other hand, there's been lab reports that have been really, for the want of better, too thin, and actually lab members haven't been able to get the information, and then it becomes extremely difficult to be able to ask those challenging questions of the leadership of the school. But having said that, and that's why I've put it at the bottom, obviously it is an evolving document. So if during your lab or your trustee meetings you're finding actually this really isn't giving us the information you need, it's your documents, obviously do please report back in terms of bits that are easy to read, bits that are difficult, or I'd really like to know that about the school. And obviously we can work together to make sure that we've got that sort of consistency and uniformity across the reports. So in terms of the actual content, you'll see I've just taken this from 2 of our school's lab reports. You'll see very, very similar in terms of the layout that we've got. So again, the reasoning is that actually you should be able to pick up any lab report from any of our schools and be able to find your way around it quite easily. And also if you're got responsibility for a particular area that you're interested in, you should then obviously through these contents pages be able to go straight to the information you need, because again there's nothing more frustrating than in a governor's meeting you're trying to go backwards and forwards through the paperwork to be able to find the part that you've got a particular question or query about. Within the lab reports, you'll start to see down the side of the lab reports parts that say for governor information and for governor challenge. Again, that's there to be able to help you. Obviously, the sections that say for governor challenge, the school are looking for you to be able to ask, or the trust for you to be able to ask those challenging questions about that. Literally, the information is there for you to be able to ask, clarify and find out. Having said that, the parts that say for governor information doesn't mean that you can't be asking questions and you can't be trying to find out information. So obviously do still ask questions about any area of the report that you've got. And building on what we've said before, it should then be able to help you link to your area of responsibility. So if you are responsible, for example, for safeguarding within your lab, then you should be able to use your contents page to go straight to the lab and be able to ask questions that are relevant to your particular area. And if we've got things right, you should also be able to see that correlation between the lab report, the CEF that the school have presented you, and also the school improvement plan. All three documents should triangulate together. So what you're seeing in one document, you should then see the documentation, the summary, the updates on where the school is in relation to those different areas. Again, if you're not, that's obviously where your challenge and your questioning could come in. Or the CEP is saying this, but you've just given me a head teacher's lab report that says this. Any reason for the discrepancy? So again, it's opening up those conversations. So again, you're not dealing with massive documents. You've got three key documents that you can work around. Really important, obviously, you know, seems obvious, but if it's not there, then ask. You know, if there's something that you are really interested in or you want to find out, then ask. The worst that's going to happen is the school might have to say to you, we haven't got the information at the moment, but we'll come back to you. So make sure, you know, if you're going to take one thing from looking at reports, make sure you ask those questions. There's nothing worse than as a head teacher sitting there and you spend all of the time writing the lab report and collecting the information, and the trustees or the lab members sit there and they haven't got any questions to ask. It's fantastic because it obviously means you're very happy, but actually they want to be able to give you as much information as you require to be able to support themselves and the school moving forward, because at the end of the day, the leadership and management judgment of Ofsted is based largely as well on the role of our labs and how good they are at holding the school to account as well as supporting them. Obviously, use your expertise. The reason that we've asked you to be on our lab board is not only because you're very lovely people and volunteered, but actually you bring your own skill set to it. And it might be that you've, within your everyday working life or experiences that you bring to the lab, you've got that particular expertise and knowledge that other lab members might not have. So again, you know, please do bring your expertise, your knowledge to that lab meeting, because it could be that you might see it as a very obvious question because you deal with it every day in your working life, but other lab members might not have that knowledge to bring. So without further ado, let's have a look into the document. Now, the document you've got here, I've based it on the lab reports and the trustee reports that you're going to see. So again, hopefully the information that we go through, you should then be able to pick up the next report that you get and be able to ask very similar questions. So what I'm going to do is just to talk you through some of the questions that you might get on one section and then give you an opportunity to be able to ask your own questions that you might have on other sections. So looking at pages 1 to 6, this is obviously from the document that you had beforehand and looked at during your half-an-hour reading. This is about the context, pupils and staffing of the school. So having had a look through the sorts of questions that you might be asking based on this information. Now, on page number 3, if you've got the document in front of you, you'll see that there's a falling roll across Key Stage 1, and particularly no numbers in the nursery. So that will be raising maybe alarm bells of actually, have we got a falling roll? We've got our future of our school is not coming in. In our nursery, we've got -20. So it might be that you're asking questions around, why have we not attracted children into our nursery? Is it because another nursery's opened down the road, which has taken some of our numbers? Is it because the school's reputation's taken a nosedive and actually parents aren't wanting to send schools? So again, unpicking why those numbers in Key Stage 1 are particularly low. And if you look through the rest of the early years in Key Stage 1, we've got, again, falling numbers. In our reception class, we've got -1. In our year 1, we've got -3. Our year 2 picks up slightly, but actually we've only got 1 extra pupil coming in. So again, is it building for you as LAB members a picture that this is a school that parents aren't wanting to send their pupils to? So again, that might be a particular flag that rises. We've got large numbers in Key Stage 2. Great, we've got our numbers up, but what are we going to do to accommodate these extras? Is it that the school, because they're not getting the numbers in at early years in Key Stage 1, are overloading their Key Stage 2? Great for finances coming into the school, because obviously, you know, in the crudest terms, money, bottoms on seats equals money for the school. But actually, is that to the detriment of the quality of teaching and learning that's happening up in the upper school? For particularly, I'm thinking about the Cheetah class in year 5. They've got 34 children in that class. What are the school, and in particular the year 5 staff, doing to make that manageable? It'd be very interesting to find out what the quality of teaching and learning is like in that class, to make sure that with 34 all of the children are getting the time, attention and the quality teaching they need. If we move on to page 4, in terms of the leavers and the joiners, again, this might be reinforcing our questions at early years in Key Stage 1. We've got more pupils leaving the school than we've got joining. We've got nine pupils leaving, and we've only got 5 joining. So actually, not only have we got less numbers in our school than we want, we've got pupils moving out of the school. So again, is that raising alarm bells, in that we've got parents, carers that aren't very happy about what is happening in the school? It could be that when we ask the question, it could be that a number of families are moving out of the area because housing's gone up. It might be that something else has happened in the local area that's made those numbers. Maybe a new whizzy school's open with lots of resources, lots of fantastic incentives for parents to join, but obviously really important to be getting the answers to those questions. You know, and again, thinking forward, if you're a parent or carer that is wanting your child to come to school in the next year or two, and you see that pattern, it might be that it's putting you off sending your child to the school. So do we need to do a big PR push in terms of selling our own school to get some of these numbers back? Or is it deeper than that, that maybe there's something going wrong in terms of the quality of the leadership within the school that is putting parents off of coming? Moving down to the next section, the gaps in staffing. We've got lots of gaps in our staffing that have not been filled, and again, quite key positions. We haven't got a SEND lead. There's no one leading our SEND in the school. If we haven't got a SEND leader, who is running it? Is it the head? Is it the deputy? Is it another member of the SLT? Or has it just been completely ignored? Again, might be questions around why we haven't got a SEND lead and what we're going to do to recruit one. Is it that the head says, yeah, that's great, we identify there's a problem, we've used somebody else from across the trust? Or are they saying to you, don't know what we're doing? So again, not only is it's the questions, it's those responses that you're going to get that maybe will be hopefully reassuring you, or if not, raising those further questions and possible alarm bells. We've got a missing class teacher. What are we doing to cover that class teacher that's missing? Have we put teaching assistants in to cover? Have we got supply cover coming in? If we have got supply teachers coming in, is that supply teacher consistent? Have we monitored their quality of teaching and learning that they're providing? If we are going down the supply route, what impact's that having on our budget? Is it sustainable? What are we doing to go and recruit? And again, we've also got a missing teaching assistant. What are we doing with that teaching assistant? Are we swapping round our other teaching assistants so that class that's missing one doesn't lose out on that opportunity? Have we pulled our teaching assistants so they're just focused on key areas of the school, key interventions rather than with each class? And if not, and there's no TA support within that class, is it to the detriment of those pupils? How can they reassure us as lab members that those pupils are not at a disadvantage compared to their peers in other parts of the school? Looking down at the staffing changes on page 5 here, lots of resignations within the school. You know, what is happening here, especially if we look at it and then refer back that a lot of those members of staff are senior leadership team. Is this raising concerns for us that the executive head teacher and the head teacher are not the most effective team to work with? Is it that they are very effective and there's been issues in the school and those members of SLT are being moved on because they're not working to the standard? Is it that we're training our staff so well and that they're all going for promotions elsewhere and actually it's a sign of the school? My concern leading from that would be, actually, if we have got those resignations, that's great if people are moving for promotion, but are we filling those promotions with new members coming through? What are we doing to have succession planning in place? We've identified staff members are going to go, what are we going to do? So again, all the way through, not only is it the questions, but it's that so what? You know, this has happened, so what? What's the impact going to be on the school? And again, maybe obviously the head teacher and the SLT won't be able to necessarily go into it, but some of those reasons for leaving are personal or unknown. Is it that the chair of the lab then has a meeting with the head teacher, the executive head, and says, obviously you might not be able to tell me the reasons, but you know, give you some more information so you can be working out why we've got those staff leaving our school. And more worrying, if we go over to page 6, there are no appointments. What are we doing to fill these resignations? And again, raising alarm bells. Possibly, if this is our last lab report of the year, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 members of staff that we haven't replaced in September. What is our plan going to be when those people step back through the door in September when we are 5 members of staff down? So again, a few key questions there that you might want to consider in terms of the context and staffing. So moving on to page 7 and 8, this is our SWOT analysis, obviously for the
suggestion that page 7 and 8 to get some feedback from our governors and trustees to see if anybody has picked up any areas for challenge there before.
Yeah, that was my plan, to once I get to this page not to continue. Thank you. Yeah, so I was just going to say before we started, those that obviously were very good in education at using acronyms, SWOT, for those of you that haven't come across it, are the strengths, weakness, opportunities and threats that the school would have, and there'll be SWOT in each of the key areas that are linked to the Ofsted framework that Emma started. So having a look, first of all, at the leadership and management, is there any particular questions, queries, concerns that as a lab or trustee board you might have around that SWOT?
Can I ask a different question? What is the PAN number of this school?
It is 420.
So that's definite. So that there's no oversubscription and class sizes above 30. We've got 34 in the class.
Yeah, they've gone over their PAN for this school.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
They've been asked, they've gone above it, yes, to make up for the losses lower down the school.
Yeah, Okay.
Yeah, so you're right, Pat. Then you'd be asking the questions about the pan and why they're taking more, going over in some year groups and having so little pupils in other year groups.
Yep. Okay.
Did we have any questions about the leadership and management section of the SWOT?
I have a question. Pat Mayo wasn't able to join us today, but she has sent through a question. I'm not sure if it's for this bit, Paul, but she says about the staff survey, a very demoralised workforce by the sounds of it, and how are the SLT going to address this, apart from telling them everything they're doing for them?
Yeah, fantastic. And again, that's at the end of the report, but I agree with you. And I'd actually written under surveys very damning and needs unpicking as a priority by the lab members, because yeah, it looks very much like morale is very low within the school, doesn't it? Right, if I go through then very quickly the questions that I would have had around leadership and management. If you have a look through, it's all about how good the executive head is. Leadership and management judgment is not just about the executive head of the school. So what about other staff? What about the SLT of the school? What about the lab within the school? No mention of them at all. What are the MLT doing now they're in place? MLT being the middle leadership team. It says on strengths MLT in place. Again, comes back to that. So what? They're in place. What is their impact? And again, what expertise sits within the SLT? It says it's a range of expertise within the SLT. That's great. Is it expertise in making paper aeroplanes? We don't know as a lab what those are. So let's actually unpick and ask what that expertise is, and then we might be able to ask questions off of the back of that. How is workload being considered?
Sorry, Paul. Rebecca has a question in the chat. The question is, what are the governors doing? They are an area of weakness.
Brilliant. Yeah. So again, you know, that if we've identified as a weakness that the governing body, what are we doing as a lab? Have we had a governing body review? Have we asked for support from other labs across the trust? Have we entered training? So again, you know, really good one, and being self-reflective as a lab about what we're doing. So on our one, it says workload and well-being are considered. So what are we doing in terms of workload and well-being? And is there then a correlation between that and the number of staff that we've got leaving within the school from the earlier section? Looking out the what
has a question. Faith has said, it also says that well-being is being considered, but the staff survey is quite negative. So what is being considered and what actions are being taken? So those two things aren't marrying up. Well spotted.
Yeah, excellent. So again, that link together, and especially as well if we then went into our SEF and it says all of our staff are happy and content within the school. So it's again require that cross-referencing between our documents that we've got to see if there are discrepancies, and actually trying to get the school away from making sweeping statements without backing them up with evidence. So looking at the quality of education SWOT, did any lab or trustee members have any points or questions that I would ask about this section?
For me, it's just got development of assessment on there. It doesn't tell you what type of assessment, what your systems are in place, how it's going to be measured.
Yeah, excellent. What assessment? Brilliant. Yeah, you know, where's some more detail around the assessment of the school? If we've got to go and stand in front of an inspections team and talk about how good the assessment is, and we don't know as lab or trustee members even what assessment systems the school are using and how effective they are, puts us at a massive disadvantage.
And Felicity's written, in quality of education, what data and what is the purpose of the data? Is it being used effectively? I think it just says data, doesn't it, in strength? So
It
great
does,
question,
yeah.
Felicity.
Brilliant, Felicity. Yeah, so again, you know, and I think I put that as my first one. How and why is the data a strength? You know, what's telling us a strength? Is it a strength all the way across the school, one particular key stage, even one particular class? Again, it's about that needing much more detail. We talks about the curriculums developed.
James has his hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to make the point. It's quite alarming that under weaknesses, teachers' subject knowledge of own curriculum-led areas is picked out as something that needs that is a particular weakness, and it would be something that I'd imagine the governing body would want further clarification on exactly why that's the case.
Yeah, I agree, definitely. And yes, if we've identified it as a school that's a weakness, what are we doing about it? You know, we can't be experts in all areas, but actually if it's their own curriculum-led area, have we got an issue in terms of not only training, but in terms of the SLT assigning subjects to staff that they're not particularly strong in?
Well, James Nunn has a question as well. How does triangulation work? What has it been triangulated with?
Excellent. So again, it's that triangulation. There should be a triangulation between the quality of teaching and learning that you're seeing in the class, the books, the pupil surveys, the planning, all of those four together, and the SLT of the school should be able to come and give you a very accurate view to the lab of what the quality in teaching and learning looks like, and they should be able to refer to those four areas as well as other areas to be able to build up that triangulation picture.
Lovely. And Faith has said new staff are shadowing subject leaders, but they have to acknowledge that subject leadership is an area of weakness. So what support? And James has also said recruitment may be an issue.
Excellent. Yeah, and then that comes back to the first section we started at with resignations and staff leaving. Have we got a recruitment issue? Very interesting to ask, especially as you have got trust representatives on the lab boards. Is that an issue across the whole trust? Is it something that the trust are facing in all their schools, or is it specific to our school? So again, if I just think we had that question, how's assessment being developed? What assessment have we got? And why is it only, and this comes back to the question we just had, why is it only the executive head teacher triangulating, and who else is involved in this quality assurance? Are we getting just the executive head teachers' views? Where do they use the rest of their senior leadership team, their subject leaders, the trust, outside agencies? You know, how accurate can we feel as labs that the executive head teachers got their finger on the pulse?
And
again,
I think Karen's made a good point. There's a real lack of measurement and impact. And James has said the high capability of the exec head is questionable. I think we'd all agree that for sure.
Excellent, yeah. And again, we talked about the non-negotiables. My question there would be how much consultation, especially if we've got an issue with staff morale and staff leaving. You know, sometimes the leadership team of the school have to make decisions, but was it a leadership decision, or was it just the executive head coming in and making that decision? Any questions around the personal development section of the SWOT?
Paul, we have 5 minutes left, so we might have to motor through this one a wee bit.
Okay. I would pick out about how do pupils talk to us. It talks about that. How and why is the PSHE within the school strong? Talks about us having a kite mark. When and how are we going to apply for this as a school? There's a mental health display in the school. Is it interactive? And how do we know it's interactive? How do we know it's not just there as wallpaper?
Yeah, exactly.
We've talked about learning ambassadors in the school.
Yeah, I was going to ask that.
Idea. How's it going to benefit us as a school? What, you know, is it just a tick box, or are they actually got some impact?
Yeah, that was going to be my question.
Excellent question, Pat.
Yes, I've underlined it.
Brilliant. How likely are it says the trusts are going to give us money? How likely are the trusts to give us money for one-to-one? And again, if the trusts are going to give us money, how's it going to benefit the school? What are we going to do with it, and how do we see it as being a particular impact? Behaviours and attitudes. Where's the evidence that pupils behave well? Have we done our governor monitoring that says actually yes, we agree with that? We did some monitoring in term 2. Couldn't we agree with it? Do we disagree with it? Where's that evidence that shows it, that's measurable? Is the monitoring of behaviour by anyone else? Again, the monitoring says it's been done by the executive head teacher. attitudes to learning are good most of the time. What does that mean? 10%
Mm.
of the time, 90% of the time, every day apart from Monday mornings? Again, I think that one probably needs a bit more unpicking as well.
Mm.
Why lunchtime supervisors a weakness, and what are we doing about it? You know, we've identified as a weakness, but again, it's that so what? Yes, it's a weakness. We can't just say it's a weakness, don't worry about it. What are we going to do to upskill them and support them so they can be more effective? Safeguarding, you know, again, is it monitored fully? Because it seems to be very little amount of pupils involved in agencies. This comes back to the presentation that Debbie gave. It's about delving into it further. What agencies are involved, how they supporting. And again, during the lockdown period, there definitely seems to be a lapse going on. Is this the school taking their eye off of the ball?
Can I be picky? Because you know me,
Yes.
what I'm probably going to ask. I can't see anything directly involving our children in care in any of this. I looked after children. I can't see anything totally specific about what is happening with them, with the virtual school, social workers, etc. There doesn't seem to be anything written on here. And another point I'd like to make is on the threats, reference, opportunities, people's joining unknown profiles. Now that would worry me and probably worry a school as well, because if you haven't got a profile of a pupil, where are you? I know that sometimes, you know, EHCPs have not been up to scratch, but we seem to be sorting that out. But that really hit home to me, that particular sentence, and really nothing about our children in care.
Fantastic. And this comes back to what I was saying, Pat, in terms of, you know, we've got certain lab members like yourself that have got particular interest and expertise in SEND. So if the school have missed off looked after children, or they've not raised profiles, that should be, as it has with Pat, raised those flags. So we're then asking those questions rather than thinking, oh, somebody else might answer that one. So, yeah, brilliant. So again, just speeding through, obviously, because of the time, our page 11, you know, where is the SENCO? What are we doing to ensure this group are getting the support they need? And actually, as Pat has just raised, you know, is it that because we haven't got a SENCO within our school that some of those key groups, that key information is missing? Is all that information being held too centrally? Our cultural capital, really vague, needs far more detail. How can we just say under our cultural capital, well, yes, it's happening. We sort of identify gaps, we'll do some trips. Let's find this, dig down and get a little more information about that. And how is well-being taken seriously? This comes back to the question, I think it was Faith asked. Actually, if we've got low staff morale, we've got survey which is really poor, how is that conducive to really good well-being? And actually, if we're taking it that step further, if the well-being of our staff is extremely poor, does that mean the well-being then of our pupils is extremely poor? If you've got unmotivated, you know, teachers that don't feel valued, that's going to then possibly be sort of projected across the school into our pupils. Budget. Why are only the CFO, you know, our chief finance officer and the executive head taking part in budget monitoring? Was the head teacher involved? Were subject leaders asked for their input? So again, there might be a really good reason for it, but it's again unpicking those. How are we covering the maternity leave? Is that going to have a financial implication on the school, and have we budgeted for that to happen? We've got somebody wanting reduction of hours. Who is this and the impact it will have? Is it a class teacher? Is it a teaching assistant? Is it a member of SLT? You know, we can ask, but as a school, are we in a position to be able to offer that reduction of hours? How can you reassure us as lab members that that's not going to impact on the day-to-day running and the quality that the school provides? We've mentioned the review. You know, how are the trusts coming in and what are they doing? It was lovely that the trusts are involved, but what are they doing? And again, we've mentioned it lots in our surveys, really damning, needs unpicking as a priority by the governors. Why is it so poor? Can you give us reasons why we've got such negative survey results? And again, just generally to bring it together, all sections have been written by the executive head. Where is the distributed leadership within this school? and how are other staff members being given autonomy or being held to account? If you as the lab are only seeing the executive head every meeting and we're not having that opportunity to maybe come in and do our monitoring, lots of questions, especially as possibly we're not 100% sure about the impact and the effectiveness of our executive head here. Lots of spelling errors. You know, was this report even proofread, or was it rushed and sent across to the lab? Was the executive head's PA asked to check it? You know, how much priority are you given as a lab? If the exec head can't even give you a report that hasn't got any spelling errors, yes, we appreciate the odd spelling error happened, but for me, there's quite a lot within this report. So again, if this slapdash shoddiness is happening for you as lab, what does that look like for our pupils in the class? Do we need to investigate that further? And again, very vague in places, comes back to my initial point about if the detail's not there, and it's important as lab members and trustees that we ask for that information we want. You know, could we ask for others to come to the meeting to ask questions? Could we ask for a presentation at the start from the SENDCO? Could we ask for a presentation at the start for the person in the school that leads on cultural capital? And if the exec head is saying to us, that's me, that's me, that's me, then that's going to raise a lot of alarm bells in terms of where the power within that school lies and the lack of distributed leadership. So that was a very speedy trip through the head teacher's report. Has anybody got any questions or queries or points they'd like to make?
Yeah, just another quick one from me, please. Going back to finances and everything else and what I've just said, there is nothing on here. It's got about first trips, but it doesn't say how pupil premium grant is going to be allocated to our pupils and what's happening with it and how it's being spent. So that all comes into my previous comments, really.
Yeah, again, fantastic, Pat, because again, pupil premiums should be something that the lab members have got a really close eye on. And if we're not getting information, then it's something we need to be asking for.
Any other questions or comments? Folks, we hope that you found today useful. There's an awful lot of information we appreciate. So I think our decision to kind of break it down into bite-sized pieces for next year hopefully will help. And it means that you're attending training that's really spoke to you, really, in your role. So again, hopefully that is going to help. If there is anything at all that you need some advice and guidance on where to start with a particular area, or you know, somebody to kind of walk